Thanks for staying with us on One Slot. We're still discussing tenure and negation and consolidating Africa's democracy. And stay with us on the program, we have Dr. BASSÈNE, Pape, Chérif, Bertrand. He joins us from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you once again for staying with us on One Slot. And before we went on the break, we were discussing Senegal's 63 years of independence, and you were also looking at what is happening so far. And taking a look back at the past, I mean, since 1960, when Senegal gained independence, from the time of Leopold Senghor, Abdoulaye Diop, and all the other presidents, what would you say was the major legacy to what we have in Senegal today?
We have two regimes that are quite different. We have a socialist regime under Senghor and Abdou Diouf. Then we have a liberal regime, democratic regime. The name is democratic, but they are liberals, capitalists, which under Macky Sall and Abdoulaye Wade, they are quite different. Because if I take Senghor, he thinks first about, how to create a nation. We have what we call multi-ethnic nation, and then he needed to build something through what we can. To Abdou Diouf is quite different, but he tried to cope with what Senghor has left. And when came Abdoulaye Wade, the economy was further more important for them than building a nation and the kind of interconnection between the ethnic groups. They are more thinking more about how to enrich people. People are trying to get rich rather than thinking about the majority and how to build ethnic groups, etc. Culture is missing under the liberal groups, while culture were very strong under Senghor, for example. Okay, we start having something different based on the international economic restrictions that our countries faced in the 1980s. Under Abdou Diouf, we started seeing that, but culture is missing right now. We have no policy on culture and how we build a nation through, ethnic, relationship.
Present government, I mean, we have Macky Sall. He has ruled for about 2 tenures, and we're seeing protests recently in Senegal. But if you look back in 1980s, just like you rightly mentioned, we had the same sort of protests. How similar are they when we look at Senegal of today?
In the 1980s, it's more like, the youth were looking for how to be integrated. And then after you finish school, you go there, you find no job, you don't have a job, and then for that youth, they are looking for how to be integrated once you have graduated from school, And right now, indeed, you can see it. They will talk about economy and integration, indeed. But for this reason, they tend to accuse it to the lack of democracy. And the youth now wake up for democracy, as if democracy will give them the job that they needed. But behind that demonstrations, is more like, they need transparency. And they are trying to accuse the system, the regime, as it is there, that as a corporation of people, as I said earlier, that try to get enriched and not thinking about the rest of the people. So they think that our countries are rich enough, to help everyone there. That's why, it's quite different from the 1980s. It's not just like they are looking for a job. Indeed, it's a reality, many of the youth is not working, but we have new philosophies of how to get rich or how to manage yourself and create your own business if you want to work. Work is not being recruited by the state, etc. So they are looking for how to share the benefits of our economy to the majority instead of being, gathered by a small group of people who get richer and richer, or getting richer through politics. And then this is the kind of demonstration we are having right now. And then they are asking for transparency and democracy. And behind democracy, this is the main idea, is about transparency. And behind transparency, indeed, they talk about the limitation of regime duration, not regime duration, regime terms, Those are the many questions that we have right now. But in the early 1980s, I think the kind of youth we have was those who went to school and came out, and tried to find jobs. They are not able to find it. And the kind of response that they had is just like they are telling them, you can be a student forever. But they knew that you cannot be a student forever. You have to stop and find a job. But there is no issue there, no solution at that time. This is the kind of comparison that I'm trying to make between the kind of generation that we have in the 1980s and starting from 2000.
And if you look at Senegal today, because you talk about economic emancipation in Senegal, President Macky Sall has gone for 5 years, 2 terms, supposedly. How would you assess the administration?
If I grasp your question, what we have right now, you cannot judge negatively the regime that we have now. To say it frankly, they are trying to do the best, because there is a kind of favorability in terms of the resources, the natural resources we have found in Senegal. They have the chance, or they are lucky enough, to be in power, and it coincided with our possibility, to find out resources that can help develop the country. And for that, they are trying to do their best to invest. But it's not a real investment. Let's say they are borrowing money, expecting that in the future, we're going to have, the necessary money to pay back. But right now, they know that the country is in a very, economic tendency, positive tendency, so they can borrow money and build the future of Senegal. They are doing the best. To judge the regime right now, I think the administration is doing very good things. The issue is elsewhere. It's not about, it's also an issue of management, indeed. We can raise it. But they are doing the best they can do.
But Dr. BASSÈNE, if they are doing the best, sorry to cut you short there, if they're doing the best, then why do we have these series of protests? I mean, we've seen protests against the trial of the opposition leader, Ousmane Sonko. So why are we having so large a protest in Senegal if you feel that the president, Macky Sall's administration, has been doing the best to improve the economic situation in Senegal?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And the issue is here, it's democracy, and it's about changing regime. So those who are in the regime, if they think they are the only one that can, manage the country and that can exploit the resources of the country, and no one else can do it, here is the problem. Because we have many of those that have other solutions or other perspectives in how to use our own money and to develop the country. As I said, right now, we are not seeing, the effectivity of our resources. We are just borrowing money to build the country. But for some, it's too early to do so. You cannot borrow money and expect that in the future you're going to find it. I mean, economically, I cannot, explain it, like economists will do it. But what I understand is that we have understood that we have natural resources, we have the possibility to exploit them. We knew that it's going to happen. But right now, we are not waiting to have that possibility to develop our country, but we are going to borrow money in order to do so. And this is, the kind of management and the kind of risk that people are, criticizing, to understand it. And those in the regime, they tend to think that they are the only ones that are able, to manage the country, to be those who rule the country and that have the best policies for the country. And, in a democratic, country, we need that kind of, discussion. But as far as those in the regime think that they are the only one that can, rule the country, problems start coming out. So for this one, this is another issue, quite different. We can judge them based on what they have done. That's an issue. We can also start judging them on what they think they should do for the future and what they think about themselves, when they think that they are the only one who can develop the country. This is where things started to get, awkward and complex.
You mentioned effectivity of resources and then a part of it borrowing money, which has led to the situation that we're having in Senegal. Now, if you go back to the 1980s, one of the situations of the protests that we looked at was the fact that a lot of youths were complaining that these resources were being taken over by French colonialists. So if you look at today, looking at the economic situation in Senegal, how would you assess the relationship between France and Senegal, especially with so much anti-French sentiments that we're having today? Do you still feel that Senegal is still under the dictates of the French government?
Oh, okay. Until I can take the university, until the 1980s, under Senghor, most of our administration, we are paid from France, and we depend from the French, economic, how can I say it? Rules, if I can say so, or French administration, to tell the truth. And we talk about independence. We knew that when we took independence, it was not the state that are paying for its employees. We were still depending on the French system, the French colonial system. That's the truth. And our politicians try to find how we can depend on ourselves, and they try to develop the kind of economy policies that can help us depend on ourselves. But those economy failed. Our rulers did not take the risk, enough risk, in order to see how we can develop by ourselves. We did not take them. And at that time, we did hear that, we have oil, we can develop it. But at that time, the rules are quite different. Finding oils or resources, Senegal is at that time, let's say, it's not easy to find oil resources or natural resources. It was very complex. It was very difficult. We depended on France because we did not take enough risk, for example, to develop agriculture, for example. Those policies have failed. So for a long time, our economy based only on, import-export, on tourism, which is so small. It's not, a lot of tourists that are coming in Senegal, for example, to tell the truth. So we were very dependent from France. So for this generation, it's quite different, and we understand it. We knew that now, our resources were found. Now we knew that our resources were found. We don't need, to depend on, external bank rules, etc., or external economic rules. Why not to depend on our resources and maybe, to take enough risk not to go and borrow money, maybe to have a policy that will tell us, guys, we have the riches, we have natural resources, we can be rich. For the time being, let's keep very modest. Let's not, invest, extra unnecessary investment. Because if you look at carefully, I'm talking about what the regime has done in terms of administration, but when you look at carefully the kind of, investment that were done, there is something to criticize because it's only, limited in the capital, for example, or regions next to the capital. This is something we can criticize indeed. And the way of, taking the risk or the way of investing on the future possibilities that Senegal will have was also, the management was also very criticized by the politicians. So this is the kind of comparison. People now understand that, okay, it's not like in the 1970s when they will say that, okay, we'll try to see whether we have oil and petroleum somewhere, and, it does not work. But right now we knew that it's working. We knew that within 2 or 4 years we will be oil and gas producers. And we knew that there is a lot of money that is coming. So the kind of investment, by the way, that was right now working were not, were very, very criticized by the politician, because the different political parties, they have their own way of, seeing things, how it should be done if it were them.
So, Dr. BASSÈNE, what you're saying now, if you're looking at President Macky Sall's administration, there have been allegations that he has somewhat created a closer relationship with the French government just to hold on to power. What do you make of these allegations?
When what we call, constitutional competence, things like that, I don't always think that France have such a power when the people decide that you are not to be there. I don't think so. For my generation, let's forget it. I'm sure the Senegalese are not those who will keep on saying that France is helping him to do so, etc. But indeed, there is also a perspective in terms of analysis. But I think that it will depend on the Senegalese. Actually, we will hear a lot about the turmoil that is going on. It's necessary in Senegal. We used to see it in Senegal. We love chatting. We love getting frustrated against our government, etc. But I don't give too much, importance to France. I'm sorry to say so. I don't give too much importance to France.
And what about the opposition in Senegal? How have they been able to operate freely? Because we saw the trial of Ousmane Sonko, and we saw lots of protests happening, especially with those who thought that President Macky Sall was using the judiciary to go against the opposition. How true is that?
What I've seen is that this regime used too much, the judiciary system. That's a fact. This is what I have seen. Whenever he has all the politicians who are around him, when they have problem with him, there is always the judiciary that is intervening. Whatever he did, and I have noticed it, and it's a fact, whatever he did, there is always the judiciary system that is, invited in the kind of political struggle. And I think that is too much present on the political sphere. And this is a fact. For this, I can't deny it. One of the setbacks of his regime is this tendency, to play political tricks and then to invite the judiciary system in those tricks, That's a fact. That's a reality. Let's tell the truth. I mean, if it is a truth, this is factual. This is something we are seeing. Whatever is there against the politicians, there is always, even when he wants to change the law, he will always invite, the judiciary system. We have a judicial system that is, too much present on political discussion, on political debates. That's the truth. This is my feelings.
And talking about judiciary, I mean, we have a 2016 constitutional reform. And one of the reasons why we're bringing this conversation is that we're looking at tenure relegation and the consolidation of Africa's democracy. Now, there have been sort of rumors in Senegal that despite a 2016 constitutional reform, there are discussions that possibly President Macky Sall might be going for another term. How true is that? And if so, how would it be different from what we have in the constitutional reform? Because according to President Macky Sall, he's still saying that it would be legal for him to actually go for a third term, even though he had promised that he would not seek another term in power due to the 2 consecutive tenures that have been placed due to the constitutional reform.
Yeah, I make the difference between a political promise. I'm from the South, to tell you the truth, and I have a kind of education about political promise. I grew up in an environment where they told me, never trust the politicians, And for that, when you invite me to analyze a political promise, I will not follow you. But when you ask me to follow, what the law has said, then I will agree. And this is also when I talk about tricks and judiciary, and this is also the great game of President Macky Sall, or the regime going on. In 2016, we were invited to a referendum to change the constitutional law. And during that referendum, Article 27 that talk about the duration and the limits of, terms were integrated. And then for small words, no one, in the former constitution of 2001, it said simply, no one has the right, you have only to renew your term once, and the term will be of 7 years. And it was changed. It was first 5 years and second 7 years. This was changed by President Abdoulaye Wade. But when Macky Sall came, he wanted to bring it back from 7 to 5, because it's a political promise during the campaign.
Yeah.
No one, if you want to trust him, trust him. So what he did, he said, okay, I cannot by myself. Either he resigned after 5 years, but the constitutional, board told him, it's not they told him, he asked them whether he can apply the new referendum law that was voted 4 years later, whether he can apply to his acting regime, current term. So the constitution told him, there is no retroactivity. A new law cannot be applied to an old crime, if we can talk about it like this. If being president is a crime, the new law we have settled right now cannot go back. Then it was solved. From 2016, we knew that the guy who promised that he needs only 5 years. He won't do his 7 years. When he came, instead of resigning after 5 years, what he did, he asked the law to settle the case. And the law told him, you cannot do it. You have to pursue your 7 years, mandate. After that, if you need a 5 year term, it will be another issue. It's a new law. So starting from 2019, based on the law and the constitution, he is now having a new term of 5 years, and he has the right to renew it. As far as I'm concerned, in Africa, I do think that, and the trick he played is on the referendum, but I do think that democracy is also the respect of the institution. He cannot promise that I will just stay 5 years, and he did not, resign. And then he asked the law to settle the case, and we knew that law cannot be retroactive. So the guy, I'm sorry, if he wants to be a candidate, he can be a candidate. It was settled by the law. So now, we Senegalese, at the eve of election, we love discussing. This is a time of intellectual debate, and it is very rich. It is very interesting. I spend my whole time reading the text and the interpretation of the law. That's, the trick we have found in West African regimes. They use the constitutions and new terms, and it became an intellectual debate. It's only these intellectual debates, it also brings a case of morality, Yeah. But if we have to apply morality, then he has to resign, not to ask the law.
All right. Okay, now, Dr. BASSÈNE, we'll go deeper into the interpretation of the law and when it comes to morality in terms of tenure allegation, especially for African governments. Just take a quick breather. We'll be right back after this break. It's still one slot, and we're still discussing tenure allegation and consolidating Africa's democracy. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us at the one slot right here in News Central TV. I'm Marita Modi, and we're still discussing the trend of tenure elongation by African leaders and a way forward to consolidate Africa's democracy. Now, earlier on, we had with us Dr. BASSÈNE, Pape, Chérif, Bertrand, discussing some of the issues in Senegal. First of all, a happy Independence Day to Senegal as it celebrates 63 years of independence and reclaiming the sovereignty of Senegal. Of course, we know that Senegal gained their independence from France back in 1960. And right now, today, they celebrate 63 years of independence with President Macky Sall holding the reins of power. And we have Dr. BASSÈNE. And Dr. BASSÈNE mentioned a lot of things talking about the situation in Senegal, what we have today concerning the economy and the protests that we have seen so far in Senegal, especially with the trial of the opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, who a lot of people claim that this trial was supposedly created as a result of the ruling government. Now, Dr. BASSÈNE, I know you're still with us. Dr. BASSÈNE, if you are, thank you so much for joining us and staying with us on the one slot.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. BASSÈNE. So earlier on, we're looking at the issue of interpretation of law and looking at the constitution of Senegal, especially for governance. The president is supposed to have 5 years, but only limited to 2 tenures. And now there has been speculation of President Macky Sall once again breaking that promise he gave to Senegalese that he would only stay for the time in power. Now, the question comes not just in Senegal. We've had a series of African governments. If you look at Teodoro Obiang Nguema of Equatorial Guinea, Denis Sassou Nguesso of Republic of Congo. We have Yoweri Museveni, who has been ruling power since 1986. We also have Paul Biya of Cameroon. The question comes to mind that after this promise, after you're put in power, why do we have African governments or leaders who will still want to reign in power, to still remain in power, despite what the constitution has put forward in their countries? All right, so Dr. BASSÈNE, could you kindly put on your video so that we could see you?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Can you see me?
No.
Oh.
Okay, so just go ahead. Just go ahead and tell us the reasons why we have this.
Okay. The way I see this is that maybe we don't have the kind of institution we deserve. Let me explain it. For me, democracy must be something that starts from, it must be from down to up, from bottom to up. I think that I can take the case of, let's take the case of Chad, for example. We lost President Baby, and his son is coming to take power. What we did not understand, what we're not trying to understand, for example, in those regions, is that sometimes in the area where Islam is very present, we have sultans. And Déby or Gaddafi or Libya, sometimes to impose a system of regime, we tend to use a force, political force, or can I say term, to gather the population, the one who get the rule, the power to impose his own democracy or his own way of seeing the institution. He can stay longer in power. And I have noticed that Déby was trying to be a sultan or a kingdom. Maybe in Africa, we have to adapt democracy in the reality of our traditional institutions. If we have a kingdom, or for example, if you have a sultanate, for example, why not to see how democracy can be adapted? Not we to adapt to democracy, but how democracy can adapt it to our traditional system, for example. If we need a president, maybe we don't really, at the place, we can put someone like, we can have a president, for example. Indeed, when Senegal took independence, we have a president, but the prime minister has more power than him. Why? Because we go to a legislative regime, and people who need to be prime minister, they have to go to the field and see how the people trust them, and they become the prime minister. But the president is there like, a symbolic institution. And maybe this is what we need in Africa. We need symbolic president, for example. But how to manage, how to rule, how to manage the administration, I think that we need, prime ministers, legislative regimes more than presidential regimes. This is how I see things. I think that we're not having the real institutions in Africa. The reason why our president wants to stay longer like kings, maybe it's because there must be kings or kingdoms there, or sultans there, or maybe in our traditional institutions, we have no problem of having someone at the head of the system as long as he's alive. But this is not, this is not against the way the system or the institution works. I don't know whether you get me. This is how I see things.
Yeah, you're looking at breaking maybe a different institution in a way that African societies can actually adapt to a democracy or a system that will suit their kind of government. But recently, we've seen lots of protests going on in Africa. I mean, what are the effects when these set of leaders tend to hold on to power? How does it affect the African society before we actually look at bringing in new institutions?
Okay, someone can hold on in power as a president, but if we have a prime minister, who is elected by the people, he can stay as long as he wants. But we can have change every year or every 5 years through the prime minister. We go to election and see who can elect them.
But don't you think, Dr. BASSÈNE, don't you think that this will still be the same problem? What if the prime minister decides not to leave power? Wouldn't we have the same problem of leaders holding on to power?
So it will be a parliamentary system. The president, we know what we give him as a regime. Okay, let's take the case of Senegal. When we took independence, Senegal was just there, a president for the integrity of the nation and how to build the nation, culturally speaking. But for the policies, how to implement policies and how to develop the country, that's the role of the prime minister, and the prime minister to change him, the parliamentary system, if he cannot deliver, then we go every 5 years to election. It's quite simple to change him. This is how I'm seeing things, which means that in Senegal, we have, religious powers that have no problem in changing who is being, we have no problem for having, a religious system where, a father, when he died, the son replaced him, etc. They have the system of working. We have no problem with that. Why should we have a problem where the president wants to stay as long as he can in power? We have just to see what kind of regime and what kind of power we can give him. But for the administration and the development of the country, we can say that, okay, every year we can go to election. For me, I think that the best way to see how our traditional institution works is to see how we can have a president who, behave like a king, but at the same time, we have a strong parliamentary system that allow us to change the prime ministers when they cannot deliver. This is what I think is good for Africa. We don't need presidents, no.
Okay, and the situation where these leaders are doing badly, what happens next?
As prime minister, you mean?
Yes.
Or as president?
As prime minister.
Yeah, as prime minister, the parties will go to compete every 5 years. And I'm sure, like what we have seen right now in Senegal, the president almost lost the power in the parliament. He almost lose it, which shows us that maybe we need that kind of system where the parliament is very strong. And then right now, how the Senegalese parliament is working, that's the best forever. I'm sure before 1962, when we used to have a parliament system, a parliamentary system. In 1962, it ended in 1962. From 1960 to 1962, Senegal was, in the good path of having, policies that try to see how we can develop by ourselves. But when we ended that system, of the parliamentary system, we go back to the presidential system, we start, depending on external resources to develop ourselves. You see? And right now in Senegal, President Macky Sall was almost, losing the parliament, head, and it is quite interesting. We have the best parliament right now, and the MP are doing the very best work right now in Senegal. And I do think that this is the system that we need in Africa.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. BASSÈNE. A strong parliament, we'll look at presidential system, monarchical system. Which one definitely fits Africa? Well, time will tell. Thank you so much, Dr. BASSÈNE, for joining us on One Slot.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, despite all said and done, the reality still remains that some of these African leaders will still hold on to power for as long as they like. And protest 7 as a tool for opposing voices will continue to be the order of the day. Now, will democracy, even when attained by these countries, be of benefit to them owing to the economic and political realities of countries that currently practice democracy? Should we have strong parliamentaries, as Dr. BASSÈNE has said, or will democracy be a problem to these countries? These are questions that will help us define Africa's democracy and solve the long-lasting issues of leaders holding on to power. This is where we'll draw the curtains for today's edition of One Slot. Join us again next week for another edition of One Slot. I am Rita Omodia. Many thanks for watching.